Welcome, everyone. Friday evening. So good to see everyone here. My name is Andrea with Girls Right Now. Today, we are using the micro to write the macro with Keisha Bush, starting a novel. So we're going to hear about Keisha's journey, especially her journey with writing No Heaven for Good Boys. Then we're going to dive into 3 writing prompts, so you'll have the opportunity to write into the chat and share your work out loud. And then lastly, we'll finish up with the pretty extensive Q&A. I am going to pass it over to the amazing Keisha Bush.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you for tuning in today. It's really exciting to be here and to share. I love talking about writing, and I think all writers at some point love to talk about the craft and learn more about it. I find that as a writer and when I'm beginning to write, relying on the five senses is vitally important. Someone smells fresh popcorn that they just made. It's quite cold in my room, someone says. I can feel that. And fuzzy slippers. I have fuzzy socks and slippers on right now. So that's like a wonderful theme. Somebody wishes they had fuzzy slippers. And I say self care, get some fuzzy slippers because you deserve it. So, writing taps into many different things. There are many different techniques. And just to give you a little background, No Heaven for Good Boys is my debut novel. And I had lived in West Africa, in Dakar, Senegal, for 4 years. And I had returned home to New York in 2008. And from there, I was working at a nonprofit down in the West Village in Manhattan. And, working like 80 hours a week when I had an epiphany about a year and a half later. And so I decided to kind of like go into some old writings that I had and took a novel writing course. And in 2010, I don't know if anyone has ever gotten this advice, but after you finish a work, whether it's a short story, a poem, a novel, but whenever you finish a full work, it's advised that you take time off from it, whether it's 1 to 2 or 3 months, give yourself some separation before you dive back in for revisions so that you can see it with clear eyes, with new eyes. And so I had done that with the novel that I had written, and it was 2010 now. And I do this thing called free writing. And free writing is, I'm not trying to create anything or some major work. I just sit and I sort of get the chatter out of my head. And that's how I see it at this point in my writing life. That when I sit down to free write, I just write whatever comes. And oftentimes it'll fizzle out after a paragraph. Um, I had done some free writing and I had this idea of a young boy and his grandfather, and the grandfather telling him a story. And it fizzled out after about 3 pages. And I said, well, I'm really interested in this. And I went back to it and it fizzled out. And so, you know, it's through this free writing though that I ended up starting No Heaven for Good Boys. I decided to use fiction as a vehicle to tell a nonfiction story about a human rights crisis that is actually still going on today. It's an interesting way to use fiction as a vehicle to propel someone's story on a platform. And so relying on the five senses helped me to sort of see, feel, hear, and taste. If you notice, I talk about the micro. I did not realize early in my writing career that every single novel, when I look back, I use this technique almost for every novel. And I use this technique when I'm away from work for a while and I'm trying to get back in a novel or story. And I'm just like, whoa, what was I feeling the last time I, wrote about these characters? So what ends up happening is you find an object or a place, you confine yourself, right? And you put yourself in this small space. You have to then go to your five senses to define it. And then after you define it and you feel comfortable in that space, you ask the 5 W's: who, where, when, why, what, and then you can even ask how. What you do is you put yourself in this little place and then you start to build out. And so using the micro, in my opinion, is such a great way, using an object is such a great way to enter the story, whether the object stays in the story or not. We sometimes need a vehicle of some sort to get to the deeper story. And that's one of the techniques that I like to use in my own writing. I love visual art, I love photography, I take photographs, and I bring some of the same techniques that you would use as a photographer into my writing, or as a painter into my writing. The senses for me are so important in my writing. How are you feeling? What do you smell? What do you taste? Okay, so I don't want to ramble on too longer because I want us to have writing time. And I want you to try to use some of these techniques because I love them passionately. You know, here's the thing though, with writing and with writing prompts, there's no correct way or wrong way to do it, which is so great because the prompt and using an object, it's only a vehicle. So if it actually got you to sit down and write, bravo. Like, you know, the goal has been achieved. Although we're using the micro, it is such a large experience for the reader: object, senses, and then who, what, where, and when. And I mean, you can just literally take off from there in your writing. And if you are in the middle of a project and if you've been away from the project for a while, using the same technique with your character allows you to get in, to re-embody back in the character, back in the story, in a way that actually ends up being really rich. It is such a great technique to utilize in your writing that just allows it to expand. But for you as a writer, you feel like you're in this microspace with these blades of grass, right? Or with this journal or with this object or in this house. But if you force yourself to stay with it, you have to, again, tap into more of the senses and then place yourself. And when you do that, the reader is able to get so much closer to the character and to the story itself, and then begins to feel it themselves. And that's what you want to do. You want to grasp your reader and bring them on this journey with you, writing in these sort of micro spaces that confine you and then force you to reach out and zoom out and go back into this macro space. It's super important to infuse yourself in arts because the commitment, and I think it's really interesting to see the commitment of other artists because it's really hard to be a writer. This is not some like walk in a park, like I just wrote a paragraph and it's like better than Shakespeare, you know? Like I wish. As a wave, we can come forward and just like make such major changes in the literary world, especially as women and as women of color and women coming from different backgrounds across the board. And just one thing I want to say,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what story you're writing, that story is important. So don't let that deter you.
Could everyone just unmute and give Keisha a wondrous round of applause for her incredible generosity? I'll start and just start with the clap.
Yes, Keisha, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha. I can't say enough about how generous you are, how amazing this was, and how specific you are with your advice.
Okay.
And truly, I feel like so many people here are ready now to start their novel, or at least have the tools to really jump into it. So
Yeah.
we're just super grateful for you and so glad that we could celebrate you tonight and the amazing journey that 2021 is going to be from you and from now on, right, as a debut novelist. So thank you so much for being here.